Hey, what's up everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we are starting the 2023 Champions Reports, and this will be on the World Boxing Organization, the WBO, as we look at all champions and the title belts from every division from 122 all the way to heavyweight, what kind of year happened for those title belts, and what's coming up in 2024. So before we get into all that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the WBO and all the belts and champions from 122 all the way to heavyweight. We start with the 122-pound Super Bantamweight Championship, which entering the year, undefeated Stephen Fulton Jr. was the WBO and unified Super Bantamweight champ. He also had the WBC title, and he didn't fight until a major showdown with Naoya Inoue, who was the undisputed champ at 118, but gave up his belts at the end of last year and was destined to move up to 122. The fight was supposed to happen earlier in the year. It fell through. I think Inoue suffered an injury. And then in July, these two guys would go at it. And you know, a lot of people thought it was a 50-50 fight, myself included. But Naoya Inoue, the monster, just absolutely dominated Stephen Fulton Jr. in this fight. Broke him down, beat him to the punch. Fulton really didn't know what to do in this fight. And Inoue just kept attacking. But it was a smart attack. It was a boxing attack. And he broke down Stephen Fulton and stopped him in the 8th round and captured the WBO and Unified Championship. Then just this morning in Japan, Inoue defended his 2 belts, but more importantly attempted to unify all 4 titles and become a 2-time undisputed world champion when he took on fellow unified champ of the WBA and the IBF, Marlon Tapalis of the Philippines. And Inoue blasted out Marlon Tapalis with, dominated him for the most part. Tapalis had a couple moments here and there, but it was all Inoue, and he knocked him out in the 10th round to unify all 4 belts and become an undisputed champion in a 2nd weight class, only the 2nd man to ever accomplish that feat. So that was the year for the WBO title. Again, Stephen Fulton enters the year as champion. Naoya Inoue, the monster, ends the year as champion. Now, what is in store for the WBO title at 122 in 2024? Where Inoue is going to be able to hold on to those belts for as long as he wants, in my opinion, because he is such a big name. As long as he makes his mandatories, and thankfully for him, his mandatories are the biggest names. The WBO's mandatory is Sam Goodman right now, but Goodman is not next in line. So next up, you'll see the WBO and undisputed title on the line, most likely between Inoue and Luis Neri, who is his WBC mandatory and a former 2-division champ. Following that, it's up in the air because Sam Goodman is also the IBF's mandatory challenger and the WBO. I would think he's next, and I think the WBO and IBF will be satisfied by allowing their fighter to go next later in the year in Sam Goodman. And then the WBAs would be last with MJ, the former unified champ. Personally, though, I think Inoue is going to beat Luis Neri, and I think he will also beat Sam Goodman or Murajan Akhmadaliev. Whoever he fights, I believe he is going to win. Naoya Inoue, the monster, is the man, and he's a beast. And I think he is going to stay the WBO champion and undisputed champion. He could start giving belts away towards the end of the year. I think there is a chance he vacates before the end of the year and decides to move up in weight. But he says he still has things to accomplish at 122 and he wants to accomplish them. And I applaud that. And I can't wait to see him back in action with the belts. But I think he's going to go coast to coast as your WBO and undisputed world champion. 126 featherweight. Entering the year as champion was Mexico's Emmanuel Navarrete. He was the reigning champ In February, he moved up to 130 to try to accomplish winning a world title in a third weight class, something a Mexican-born fighter only 10 times had done prior. Navarrete accomplished that feat and decided to vacate his featherweight belt. Then, with the title vacated, in April, Robeisy Ramirez and Isaac Dogboe, the former 122-pound champion, decided to fight as they were the top 2 contenders. Robeisy Ramirez would dominate Dogboe in April over 12 rounds, outbox him, outclass him. Dogboe had his moments, but Ramirez captured the vacant belt. Then in July, actually on the Inoue undercard, he fought a guy named Shimizu in his first title defense and dominated him with a 6-round TKO victory. Then in December, Ramirez would defend his belt against the undefeated, very tall Rafael Espinosa, who had a 6-inch height and 6-inch reach advantage. These two went at it. Espinosa seemed to be doing the better of the work until Ramirez hurt him and put him down. And then Ramirez had a tough time staying on his feet, but he weathered the storm. And in the championship rounds, Ramirez turned it on and Espinosa outworked Ramirez in the championship rounds and walked away with a very close but deserving, in my opinion, 12-round split decision as he became the new WBO featherweight champion of the world. So we saw 2 title changes at 126. 3 different guys held the belts. Emmanuel Navarrete vacated the belt. Robeisy Ramirez captured the vacant title, and then Rafael Espinosa defeated Robeisy Ramirez. And now Rafael Espinosa ends the year as champ. Now, what's coming up for the featherweight title at 126 in 2024? As of right now, a mandatory fight has not happened since April between Robeisy Ramirez and Isaac Dogboe. So I believe that Rafael Espinosa could face his #1 contender, Arnold Kagay, next. But I also believe a rematch could happen between Espinosa and Robeisy Ramirez. I really think that's possible. Unification dreams may or may not be there. It depends on mandatory status and who gets the shot. But Espinosa is with Top Rank. Luis Alberto Lopez is also with Top Rank, and he's has the IBF belt. And then you also have the WBA title is going to be decided, and the favorite in that fight is Kolmatov, who's a top-ranked guy as well. So there is going to be room for potential unification bouts. But I think Espinosa, with the size and his heart, has a very good chance of going coast to coast in 2024 and maybe even unifying belts because he's a highly entertaining fighter. So very much so looking forward to seeing him back in action. 130 super featherweight. Entering the year, the belt was vacant. In February, the vacant title would go on the line between featherweight champion Emmanuel Navarrete and undefeated Liam Wilson. Liam Wilson would put down the favorite and veteran Navarrete in the 4th round, but Navarrete got himself up and continued and methodically broke down Liam Wilson the remainder of the bout before stopping him in the 9th round impressively and becoming a 3-division world champion with that victory. In August, he would return to defend against former 2-division world champion Oscar Valdez in an all-Mexican showdown that a lot of people were very much so looking forward to. Navarrete broke down and dominated Oscar Valdez over 12 rounds, walking away with a very deserving, in my opinion, one-sided unanimous decision as he stayed world champion. Then in November, he would return to defend his title against Brazilian Robson Conceição. And surprisingly, Conceição would outwork Emmanuel Navarrete in this fight, but would get put down a couple times by Navarrete. When it went to the scorecards in a fight that I thought Conceição maybe eked out, the fight was declared a draw, and Navarrete would escape with his WBO belt. I didn't think it was very controversial. The 2 knockdowns did matter, but Conceição significantly outlanded and outthrew Navarrete, and you could definitely make a case. So what's coming up for the WBO 130-pound title in 2024? Right now, it's up in the air what Navarrete is going to do. He's having hand surgery. He expects to be back early in the year. there has not been a mandatory fight since Navarrete fought Liam Wilson earlier this year for the vacant belt. Now, will Navarrete make a mandatory defense against #1 contender Albert Bell? Or will he push for a rematch with Conceição? Or will he move up to 135 and fight for the vacant world title there? Because he did request earlier in the year super champion status to allow him to move up and move ahead of a #1 contender and fight for the belt. And at 135 right now, lightweight, Devin Haney gave up his titles, and Navarrete has mentioned moving to lightweight already. But the title is vacant. He could come up and potentially win there and then set up major fights with Lomachenko, Shakur Stevenson. So, there are options. We'll see what happens. I personally feel Navarrete wants to right the wrong in the draw that he had with Conceição. I think he's going to push for that rematch. If not, he'll stay here. Unification is there. Oshaki Foster is the WBC champion, so that's possible. And Navarrete is the king of the division right now still. He's the #1 guy, so he might be able to get a couple of the other champions if he wants those fights to come over to ESPN and fight. Well, we'll see. 135, lightweight. The title entering the year as WBO and undisputed champion was the undefeated Devin Haney. Haney defended the title in May against Vasily Lomachenko, the former 3-division world champion, in a close, well, somewhat close fight, but a fight that I truly believe Haney lost to Lomachenko. Lomachenko outworked him. I felt like Loma won 8 or 9 rounds, and he was also pressing the action. The judges came back with a controversial unanimous decision victory for Haney as he retained his WBO and undisputed belt. He held on to the title all year, trying to potentially set up a showdown with Shakur Stevenson and Gervonta Tank Davis. Nothing ever panned out. He got an opportunity to move up to 140 and challenge for a title there against Regis Prograis, and he went with that eventually. And then right before that fight, in early December, he vacated all his titles at 135. Now the title ends the year vacant. Now what's coming up for the lightweight title at 135 heading into 2024? And for me, I think it's up in the air. We really don't know. Right now, the top 2 contenders are Denis Beriancic and Isaac Cruz. Well, actually, it's Vasily Lomachenko's #1 and Denis Beriancic's #2. Now, Lomachenko is likely going to be fighting George Kambosos Jr. for the vacant IBF title. I think Loma might be lobbying to add the WBO belt there as a vacant belt as well. I think he's lobbying for that, and I think that's why the fight has not yet been finalized between Loma and Kambosos, because he's #1 in both weight classes, in both governing bodies. But the next 2 guys, just in case that's not what's going on, is Denis Beriancic and Isaac Cruz. And right now, I haven't heard anything on the WBO ordering that fight, because I also think Emmanuel Navarrete, as I said a little while ago, is potentially in the mix to compete for the vacant belt. And I think the WBO will want to honor Loma and Emmanuel Navarrete before or with Beriancic and Isaac Cruz. So a lot of moving pieces. It's hard to say what's going to happen because Cruz is with the PBC. Beriancic will probably fight whoever if he were to get his hands on the belt. But we don't know who's going to fight yet. But we definitely know the belt is going to be determined by somebody. I hope we get a decision soon on that. 140 junior welterweight. Entering the year as champion was the reigning undefeated and former undisputed champion, Josh Taylor. He had just the WBO belt left, and in June, he decided to finally come back and face off against his #1 contender, former unified lightweight champion, Teofimo Lopez. In a fight that a lot of people thought Taylor was going to win, myself included, Lopez went out there and fought very well, boxed well, and outgunned Josh Taylor to capture the WBO championship. Lopez remained on the sidelines for the rest of the year. He didn't fight for the remainder of 2023. What is coming up for Lopez in 2024? Well, it's not yet finalized, but Lopez looks to be returning February 8th, which is a Thursday, Super Bowl week, to defend his title against Jermaine Ortiz, who's a lightweight contender moving up to 140, but a top-ranked guy. If Victoria is there, which I believe Lopez will be, it's open. It's wide open. There has not been a mandatory fight due in a while, so I think Arnold Barbosa Jr. is an option. I know Jose Ramirez was an option earlier in the year, and I think Lopez and Devin Haney want to try to lock horns as well. So a lot of moving pieces, a lot of big names at 140, but a lot of potential exciting clashes. Teofimo Lopez is one of the big stars at 140, and I think he's going to get a big fight after the Jermaine Ortiz ordeal, so we'll see what goes on. 147 welterweight. The reigning and undefeated champion coming into the year was Terrence Bud Crawford. Crawford in July finally got the desired fight that he wanted as he attempted to unify all 4 belts when he battled fellow undefeated and unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. as they competed for the undisputed title. It was a no contest. Terrence Crawford got the victory of his career as he absolutely dominated Errol Spence Jr., stopping him in 9 rounds and unifying all 4 belts, becoming the first ever two-division undisputed world champion in the 4-belt era. It was a huge victory, and he claimed all 4 belts. Crawford is still the WBO champ, and right now he did not fight the remainder of the year because Errol Spence did activate an automatic rematch clause, but the 2 sides are still negotiating which weight that's going to take place at. So what does that mean for the WBO belt? What is coming up for the WBO belt in 2024? I believe it's all up in the air based on what happens with Crawford and Spence. If it takes place at 147, I think Crawford will dominate Spence again and retain the title. If Crawford vacates, which that's what I believe is going to happen, I think he's going to end up fighting Spence at 154. Then they're both going to move up in weight. I believe he'll vacate the welterweight title, and then that's going to leave undefeated #1 contender Giovanni Santillan and #2 contender Cody Crowley to compete for the vacant belt. It's all up in the air, but it should be an exciting time. But at the very least, I think by the end of the year, we're going to have a new face of the WBO belt at 147. 154, super welterweight. Jermell Charlo entered the year as the reigning WBO and undisputed super welterweight champ. But he never defended the belt. He was scheduled to defend against Tim Tszyu in January, who was his WBO mandatory, and he couldn't do it. Injury set him back. Injury continued to set him back, and then finally, around June, he got a monster offer and opportunity from Canelo Alvarez to move up 2 weight classes and have an undisputed versus undisputed fight, as he would fight for Canelo's undisputed super middleweight title at 168. But the night of the fight, the WBO decided that once he got announced as champion, that they were going to strip him of the belt for not making his mandatory against Tim Tszyu. Tim Tszyu had become the interim champion earlier in the year, and once that happened, he was upgraded to full champion. And in mid-October, Tim Tszyu would defend that title for the first time against the tough Brian Mendoza. Tszyu would outwork him and score a hard-fought but deserving 12-round unanimous decision to retain his title. And now, what does that mean for 2024 for the WBO super welterweight belt? Tim Tszyu wants Jermell Charlo. He wants him badly in a big-time showdown. Charlo seems the one to fight too, but I don't know if and when that fight's going to take place. There have been talks that Tszyu is, if Charlo doesn't happen, he's going to fight Erickson Lubin in March or April, and that's a big fight right there for both guys. I think he can beat Erickson Lubin, but I do think Lubin stands a chance. But at some point, I think Tim Tszyu, if he gets through the Lubin fight, which I'm leaning towards that's what's going to be next, I think he's going to have to deal with either Jermell Charlo in the second half of the year or potentially Terrence Bud Crawford, who's going to be done with the Errol Spence scenario and want to fight Tim Tszyu for his title at 154. So I do believe a big fight is coming for Tim Tszyu and for the WBO belt. Unification might be tough. Charlo does have a belt. If he gets Charlo in the ring, then they can unify belts. But I also believe the other 2 guys might be open to it, whomever they end up being, if Charlo ends up vacating more of his world titles. He's already given up the IBF belt. Whoever comes out of that, I think, would be interested in fighting Tszyu. And then you got the WBC champion is still Charlo and the WBA champ, but he could be vacating more as we go. We'll see. 160 middleweight. Janibek Alamanhalai, or Kazakh style, entered the year as the reigning and undefeated champion. And I think it was June, he made an optional defense of his belt against Steve Butler of Canada, dominated him, knocking him out in 2 rounds. Then in October, he set a title unification bout up against undefeated IBF champion Vicente Gualtieri. These 2 guys would collide in a major showdown for the world title, or to unify belts. Alaman Halai, Kazakh style, dominated him and stopped him in only 6 rounds impressively, but quietly, to become the unified middleweight champion of the world at 160. He ended the year as champ. Now in 2024, what can we expect from the WBO middleweight championship? Well, as we go right now, it looks like Alaman Halai and Chris Eubank Jr. are trying to set a fight together. That would be big. I think that's a 50-50 fight. I might favor Chris Eubank in that one, but I think Alaman Halai has a good chance. Can't wait to see what comes down between those 2 and if they can get together. But I do believe that's going to happen next, and whoever wins that fight will be the king of 160, and it's going to be very hard to beat. So I think Alaman Halai has a good chance of going coast to coast if he beats Eubank, and Eubank could end the year as champion if he beats Alaman Halai, unless he gives up the title, vacates the title. So we'll see. 168, Canelo Alvarez entered the year as the reigning WBO and undisputed super middleweight champion. He would take his WBO mandatory challenger on in May, and John Ryder dominated him over 12 rounds with ease to a one-sided 12-round unanimous decision, retained all 4 belts. Then in September, he would defend all 4 belts again against undisputed junior middleweight champion at 154, Jermell Charlo, dominated him to a shutout unanimous decision as well, retained all 4 belts. He'll end the year as champion. What is in store for Canelo in 2024 and the WBO title? Well, I personally believe Canelo's going to fight either Jaime Munguia or Jermall Charlo in May and set up the huge showdown with David Benavidez in September. That's what I think is going to happen. I'm favoring Canelo to win both those belts. I think David Benavidez stands a shot at beating him in September. I do. But if he doesn't, either Canelo's going to end the year as champion or he will vacate the belts and move up to 175. But I think Canelo is going to go coast to coast again, but we'll see what happens. 175 light heavyweight, entering the year as champion, was the reigning and undefeated and unified champ, Artur Beterbiev. Beterbiev put all 3 of his belts on the line in January against his WBO mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde of the United Kingdom. It was a good-ass fight right there. Anthony Yarde was boxing well and landed some good shots on Beterbiev, but Beterbiev continued to break down Yarde and kept coming forward. Finally, Yarde ran out of gas, but was ahead on the scorecards in the 8th round when Artur Beterbiev finished him and retained all 3 belts. He would not fight the remainder of the year. In August, he was supposed to make his fight his WBC mandatory challenger and Callum Smith. He did not do that because of a retinal issue that kept him out of the ring. Now he's going to face Callum Smith in January on ESPN of 2024, and I believe Beterbiev will beat Callum Smith, but I do think Callum Smith is a very live underdog. If Beterbiev beats him, I think the undisputed title clash with Dimitri Bivol has to happen, and I think it will happen this year. And I think Dimitri Bivol is going to end the year as the WBO and undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world at 175, but I could be wrong. We'll see what happens. 200, cruiserweight. Lawrence Okolie entered the year as the reigning and undefeated champion. In March, he returned to make a mandatory defense against undefeated David Light of the United Kingdom. Kind of got a lackluster 12-round unanimous decision to keep his belt. Then 2 months later, at the end of May, he wanted to stay busy, and he took on fellow Englishman Chris Billum Smith. And Chris Billum Smith would put him down 3 or 4 times and outwork him and beat him up kind of deal. Okolie had his moments, but Chris Billum Smith would pull off an upset but deserving 12-round unanimous decision, become the world champion. He waited around a few months for Okolie to want to fight him in a rematch because Okolie had a rematch clause. Okolie ended up passing on that, and in December, Billum Smith returned to make an optional defense against veteran Mateusz Masternak. Masternak was doing well in the fight, was actually ahead on the cards, but a rib injury suffered caused him to retire in his corner after 7, and Chris Billum Smith kind of got an uneventful but retained the title and by TKO and is pushing forward. In 2024, what can we expect from the cruiserweight belt? Well, I believe Chris Billum Smith is going to face Richard Riakporhe in a rematch in the first half of the year. Riakporhe is the #1 ranked contender. I think he's going to get the crack against Billum Smith, and I think whoever comes out of that one is going to have a great second half of the year and can set up something major, potentially unifying belts or fighting the mandatory challenger, which looks like the winner of Joshua Buatsi and Dan Aziz at 175 is going to be #1 in maybe 3 different weight classes. So, 3 different governing bodies. So, it's going to be, no, Joshua Aziz at 175. I'm sorry about that. Scratch that right there. That's not the case. That was 175. But I believe Riekpor and Billum Smith is going to happen next, the rematch. And finally, the heavyweight division. Oleksandr Usyk entered the year as the undefeated and reigning WBO champion, WBO and unified champ. He was trying to set up the Tyson Fury fight early in the first half of the year. It didn't pan out. Finally, in August, he would return to make a WBA mandatory title defense and would put all 3 belts on the line against regular champion of the WBA, Daniel Dubois. After a controversial belt line shot landed that was ruled a low blow, Usyk broke down and stopped Dubois to retain all 3 belts. Now, Usyk ends the year as champion, but he has the biggest fight of his career ahead of him in February when he takes on Tyson Fury for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Usyk has the opportunity to become the 3rd man after Crawford and Inoue to become a 4-belt undisputed world champion in the 4-belt era. I think it's close to a 50-50 fight. I still believe Tyson Fury is going to win and claim all the belts. But then I think he's going to probably rematch with Usyk because both guys have an automatic rematch clause. I think he'll rematch with Usyk, and he might end up giving up that belt, and interim champion Zhila Zhang might be upgraded to champ. I think the WBO might allow Zhang to hold on to the interim belt until there's a winner of the rematch. But I'm not sure if the winner of that rematch is going to fight Zhang or not. If they do, Zhang might be able to hold on to it. But I think there's at least a 50% chance that Zhang is going to become the WBO champion at some point, be upgraded. And then who knows who he fights next before the end of the year. But it should be an entertaining year and a good year for the WBO. And that's what I got. That is the 2023 Champions Report on the World Boxing Organization, the WBO. All titles and champions from 122 all the way to heavyweight. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.